She was tied to a tree and left to die in the American wilderness. A massive grizzly emerged from the forest. No escape. No weapon. No help coming. Then the bear raised its claws and did something no one could explain. What happened next changed everything. Before this story begins, I want to ask you something important. If you believe that compassion still exists in this world, if you believe that animals remember kindness, and that even in the darkest moments hope can appear when you least expect it, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications right now. These stories survive because of people like you. What you're about to hear isn't just an animal rescue. It's not just a survival story. It's a reminder that the bond between humans and wildlife is deeper than science can explain and stronger than fear itself. Deep in the American wilderness, where help is hours away and silence can be deadly, one woman's life hung by a thread. Betrayed, injured, left behind. And yet, she was not alone. A single decision made years earlier would come back in the most unexpected way. A debt repaid. A memory awakened. A moment where instinct chose mercy over violence. Stay with this story until the very end, because the final twist will change how you see wild animals forever. If stories like this move you, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness echoes longer than cruelty. Now, take a deep breath. The first thing Evelyn Carter noticed when she woke up was the cold. Not the sharp, biting cold of winter, but the damp, bone-deep chill that creeps in when the ground has been stealing your body heat for hours. Her cheek was pressed against rough bark. Pine sap stuck to her skin. When she tried to move, pain exploded through her shoulders. She gasped. Rope burned into her wrists. Another coil crushed her chest, pinning her to the thick trunk of a ponderosa pine. Her boots were gone. So was her jacket. Blood crusted at her temple, and every breath tasted like iron. Memory came back in fragments. The argument. The accusation. The men who weren't supposed to be there. Evelyn was a wildlife compliance officer assigned to northern Montana, someone who asked too many questions and followed too many illegal tracks. For months, she'd been closing in on a trafficking route moving animal parts across state lines. She'd known she was close. She hadn't known how close. They hadn't bothered to finish her off. They didn't need to. This stretch of forest was miles from the nearest road. No cell signal. No hikers this late in the season. Leaving someone tied upright ensured exposure did the rest. Efficient. Quiet. Evelyn tested the ropes again. No slack. Whoever tied them knew exactly how to make knots that held under panic. Her fingers were numb. Her legs trembled violently as circulation failed. Then the forest went silent. Birdsong vanished. Wind paused. Even the insects seemed to disappear. A sound followed, slow, deliberate movement through brush. Crunch. Snap. Heavy breath. Evelyn's heart slammed so hard it hurt. She forced herself to look left. A massive shape emerged between the trees. Dark fur. Broad shoulders. A head that rose nearly level with her own despite being on all fours. A grizzly bear. Its coat was mottled with scars. One ear was torn. Its eyes, deep amber, locked onto her with unsettling focus. This wasn't curiosity. This was assessment. Evelyn's throat tightened. She couldn't scream. Couldn't run. Couldn't even turn her head away. The bear stepped closer, muscles shifting beneath its fur, claws biting into the forest floor. She squeezed her eyes shut. This is how it ends, she thought. Then the bear rose onto its hind legs and swung. Not at her. At the rope. The impact thundered through the tree. Bark exploded outward. Evelyn screamed as fibers snapped inches from her shoulder. The bear struck again, precise. Controlled. And in that impossible moment, terror gave way to disbelief. The animal wasn't attacking her. It was trying to set her free. The rope trembled where the bear had struck it, strands fraying but still holding. Evelyn's entire body shook, not just from fear, but from shock. Nothing in her training covered this. Bears didn't do this. They didn't calculate knots. They didn't aim blows with restraint. And yet this one did. The grizzly dropped back onto all fours and leaned in, its massive head inches from her face. Evelyn could smell damp earth on its fur, hear the low rumble in its chest. She held her breath, afraid that even the smallest movement might trigger instinct. The bear sniffed her hair, her neck, her jacketless shoulders. Then it paused. Its ears tilted forward. Its breathing slowed. The amber eyes softened, not dramatically, not magically, but enough that Evelyn felt it. A shift. As if the animal wasn't seeing prey anymore, but something familiar. "No," she whispered hoarsely. "That's not possible." The bear's muzzle brushed the rope at her chest. Carefully, almost delicately. It opened its jaws and tested the fibers with its teeth, then pulled back when the rope resisted. A frustrated growl vibrated through the air, not aggressive, but irritated. The bear struck again, harder this time. The trunk shuddered. More fibers snapped. Pain shot through Evelyn's ribs as the tension loosened slightly. She gasped, but forced herself to stay still. That's when she saw it. A long scar ran diagonally across the bear's left side, partially hidden beneath thick fur. The edges were uneven, old, poorly healed. Her breath caught. 3 years earlier, during a late spring patrol near the Idaho border, Evelyn had responded to an anonymous tip. She'd found a dead sow, shot illegally, her body already cooling. But nearby, wedged beneath a fallen log, had been a cub. Bleeding. Terrified. Alone. The wound had been in the same place. She remembered wrapping that cub in her jacket. Sleeping on the cabin floor so it wouldn't be alone. Cleaning the injury with shaking hands. Naming it something temporary, something she'd never expected to say out loud again. "Atlas," she whispered. The bear froze. One ear twitched. Slowly, impossibly, it turned its head and looked directly at her, not through her, not past her. At her. Recognition flickered there. Not human memory. Something older. Deeper. Atlas huffed softly, then pressed his forehead against the tree beside her shoulder, careful not to touch her. Then, with renewed urgency, he attacked the ropes again, claws working with startling precision. Evelyn's eyes burned with tears, because now she understood. This wasn't chance. This was repayment. And whatever had tied her here had underestimated one thing. The wilderness remembers. Atlas worked the ropes with growing urgency, claws slicing bark, teeth pulling and tearing at fibers grown. Stiff with cold and dew. One strand finally gave way with a sharp snap. Evelyn cried out, not from pain, but hope, as her right arm dropped a few inches, blood rushing back in a violent wave of pins and needles. But the forest didn't celebrate with her. It warned them. A long, hollow howl rolled through the trees. Atlas froze mid-motion. His head snapped up, ears fully erect. The sound came again, closer this time. Then another, overlapping, answering back from a different direction. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Wolves. Not one. A pack. Gray shapes flickered between the trees like moving shadows. The birds did not return. The wind stayed dead. Everything waited. Atlas stepped away from the ropes and positioned himself directly in front of Evelyn, his massive body blocking her from view. A deep, resonant growl poured from his chest, low and steady, not wasted on threats. The first wolf appeared to Evelyn's left, emerging from behind a fallen log. Large, lean, yellow eyes locked onto her instantly. Then another. Then 3 more. 6. They moved with confidence. Patience. Predators who knew time was on their side. Atlas rose onto his hind legs, towering above them, and let out a roar that shook the ground beneath Evelyn's bootless feet. The sound was raw power, territorial, final. The wolves hesitated, but didn't retreat. The alpha stepped forward. Scarred muzzle. Ears nicked from old battles. He barked once, sharp and commanding. The pack split. 2 drifted left. 2 right. 1 circled wide. Atlas dropped back to all fours, spinning to track them, torn between defending Evelyn and finishing the ropes. His thigh brushed the tree, and Evelyn saw fresh blood seeping through fur where the rope had cut him earlier. "Atlas," she whispered desperately. "Don't." He lunged first, fast, explosive. A paw slammed into the dirt where a wolf had been moments earlier. The wolf darted back, unharmed, but startled. Pack tactics. They surged in again, snapping and retreating, testing his reach. One feinted high while another rushed low. Atlas spun, and missed. A wolf broke from the right, sprinting straight for Evelyn. She screamed. Atlas intercepted with a roar and a crushing blow that sent the wolf tumbling across the forest floor. It yelped, limping back toward the pack. That changed everything. The wolves backed up, but didn't flee. The alpha stared Atlas down, calculating. Evelyn tugged at the loosened rope with everything she had. Fibers burned her skin. Her hands shook violently. She was still trapped. And Atlas was bleeding. The forest had become a battlefield, and neither of them could afford to lose. Atlas's breathing grew heavier with each second, steam rising from his muzzle as he positioned himself between Evelyn and the circling wolves. His thigh bled freely now, dark drops marking the soil. Still, he did not retreat. He never once looked away from the pack. The alpha barked again, short, sharp. 2 wolves rushed from opposite sides. Atlas charged the one on the left, swiping with brutal force. The wolf twisted away just in time, but the second wolf seized the opening. Its jaws clamped onto Atlas's wounded leg. The roar that followed was thunder. Atlas reared up, twisting violently. The wolf was flung backward, crashing into brush with a painful yelp. But the damage was done. Blood poured freely now, matting fur and staining the forest floor. Evelyn screamed his name, her voice breaking. She pulled harder at the rope around her chest, ignoring the tearing pain across her ribs. The fibers began to unravel, thread by thread. Atlas went on the offensive. He lunged at the alpha, forcing it back step by step. The wolves retreated under the sheer power of his advance, but still they didn't run. Hunger and opportunity made them reckless. One wolf leapt. Atlas caught it midair. His paw slammed the animal into the ground with bone-cracking force. The wolf cried out, scrambling to stand, but its leg buckled. It limped away, retreating behind the others. That was the turning point. The pack faltered. The alpha hesitated, then barked a sharp command. Slowly, cautiously, the wolves began to withdraw, never turning their backs. Their eyes never left Atlas until the trees swallowed them whole. Silence returned, broken only by Atlas's labored breathing. He stood there for several seconds, chest heaving, eyes scanning for movement. Only when he was certain they were gone did he turn back toward Evelyn. He limped. Badly. Atlas approached her and immediately returned to the ropes, jaws working with renewed determination. One powerful tug snapped the chest binding completely. Evelyn collapsed forward, catching herself before hitting the ground. "Almost," she gasped. "Almost there." Atlas worked the final knots with astonishing care. His teeth pulled, paused, adjusted, then pulled again. The last rope gave way. Evelyn crumpled to the forest floor, sobbing, gasping, alive. Atlas lowered himself beside her, exhausted, bloodied, but victorious. For a moment, they lay there together, two survivors bound by memory and sacrifice. Then Evelyn saw the wound. And she knew the rescue wasn't over yet. Evelyn forced herself upright despite the screaming protest of her muscles. Every nerve in her arms felt like it was on fire, circulation flooding back too fast, too painfully. She ignored it. Her eyes were locked on Atlas. Blood still flowed from the gash in his thigh, thick and dark, soaking into the soil. He sat on his haunches, sides heaving, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion, but alert. Always alert. "You didn't have to stay," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You could have run." Atlas huffed softly, a sound low and steady. He didn't move away when she crawled toward him. Her backpack lay several feet away, half hidden beneath brush where the poachers had tossed it. Evelyn dragged herself across the ground and fumbled inside with shaking hands. Her first aid kit spilled open, gauze, antiseptic wipes, bandage rolls. Atlas watched every movement. "Easy," she murmured. "It's me. I remember how you hate the smell." She cleaned the wound slowly, carefully, whispering nonsense the way she had years ago to a trembling cub. Atlas flinched once, then held still, teeth clenched but silent. He trusted her. When she wrapped the bandage tightly around his thigh, he exhaled, a long, rumbling breath that vibrated through his chest. They stayed like that for several minutes, leaning against the same tree that had nearly killed her. The forest felt different now. Quieter. Respectful. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the torn ropes, the disturbed earth, the blood. Evidence. Proof. And then something else caught her eye. Boot prints. Fresh ones. More than she remembered. Her chest tightened. "They're not done," she said quietly. Atlas's ears lifted instantly. He stood despite the injury, placing himself slightly in front of her again. Through the trees came the distant crack of a branch. Human footsteps. The poachers had come back. Evelyn's pulse spiked, but this time fear wasn't the only thing she felt. Because now she wasn't helpless. And now they weren't alone. Atlas let out a low warning growl, deeper than before. Whatever came next, it would not end the way the men expected. The footsteps grew clearer, careless now, unhidden. Two voices drifted through the trees, low and irritated. "She should be dead by now." Rope was tight. "Nobody survives that out here." Evelyn's hands curled into fists. Rage burned hotter than fear. She recognized one of the voices. The man with the snake tattoo on his neck. The one who smiled while tying the knots. Atlas shifted beside her, his growl vibrating through the ground. Evelyn placed a hand against his fur, grounding both of them. "Wait," she whispered. The men emerged into the clearing, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. They froze when they saw the snapped ropes. Then their eyes dropped to Evelyn. "You've got to be kidding me," one muttered. Their expressions changed again when Atlas stepped forward. The bear rose partially onto his hind legs, towering, bloodied, furious. One man swore. The other raised his rifle. "No!" Evelyn shouted. The gunshot cracked through the forest, but the bullet went wide, punching into bark as Atlas charged. The men scattered in panic. One tripped, hitting the ground hard. Atlas slammed down in front of him, roaring so loudly Evelyn felt it in her chest. The man screamed, scrambling backward, dropping his weapon. Evelyn grabbed the fallen rifle, hands steady now. She didn't aim at Atlas. She aimed at the men. "Drop it," she shouted. "Federal officer. You move, I pull the trigger." They froze. Sirens wailed in the distance. The men's faces drained of color. Backup, late, but coming. Atlas backed away slowly, eyes never leaving the poachers. When the men were cuffed minutes later, he retreated to the tree-lean. Evelyn met his gaze one last time. "You saved me twice," she whispered. Atlas turned, disappearing into the forest. This time, she didn't follow. Some bonds aren't meant to be held. The medevac came in low and loud, chopping the quiet forest into pieces. Evelyn barely remembered being lifted onto the stretcher, the paramedic's voice swimming in and out as shock finally took its toll. As the helicopter rose, her eyes searched the tree-line one last time. Nothing. Atlas was gone. At the hospital in Missoula, the story spread fast, but not the way it truly happened. Official reports were careful. Neutral. Safe. They said she escaped after the suspects fled. They said wildlife activity was present but unconfirmed. No one wanted to explain a bear choosing mercy. But evidence has a way of speaking. Trail cameras placed weeks earlier for an unrelated study had captured fragments, blurred footage of a massive grizzly standing between a bound woman and approaching wolves. A second clip showed the bear tearing at ropes. A third caught the moment the wolves retreated. The footage never aired publicly. Too unbelievable. Evelyn was placed on medical leave. The investigation she'd been building for months unraveled quickly once the arrests were made. Headlines focused on the trafficking ring, on court dates, on sentencing. No one asked her about Atlas. But she thought about him constantly. 3 months later, limping but healing, Evelyn returned to the forest, this time with permission, cameras off, radio silent. She followed familiar trails until she reached the clearing. The ropes were gone. Rain had softened the ground. But the tree still bore scars. She waited. At dusk, a shape emerged from the shadows. Atlas stood at the edge of the clearing, bandage long gone, wound healed into a fresh scar. He didn't approach. Neither did she. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Atlas turned and walked away, uninjured, untamed, alive. Evelyn understood then. Some rescues don't end with gratitude. They end with respect. Evelyn thought the story was over. She was wrong. 6 months after the trial, a wildlife videographer leaked the trail cam footage anonymously. No commentary. No narration. Just raw video uploaded in the middle of the night. It went viral in hours. People slowed the frames. Zoomed in. Debated in comment sections that stretched for miles. Scientists argued. Skeptics laughed. Survivors cried. A bear freeing a woman. A bear defending her from wolves. A bear standing between her and armed men. The Internet demanded answers. Evelyn was called before a Congressional Wildlife Oversight Panel, not as a defendant, but as a witness. She told the truth. All of it. About the cub. About the scar. About Atlas. Some scoffed. Others listened. Policy shifted quietly. New protections passed for grizzly habitats. Funding increased for anti-poaching units. The footage changed how people talked about animals, not as monsters or mascots, but as neighbors with memory. Evelyn never sought fame. She declined interviews, declined sponsorships, declined book deals. Instead, she returned to field work, this time training new officers. And once a year, without fail, she returned to the clearing. She never saw Atlas again. But every spring, fresh tracks circled the tree. Watching, waiting, remembering. The offer arrived on a quiet morning, sealed in a government envelope that felt heavier than paper should. Evelyn stared at it for a long time before opening it. The department wanted her in Washington. A permanent position. Policy. Oversight. Safer work. Influence on a national scale. The kind of job people dreamed of after surviving what she had. She folded the letter slowly and set it on the table. Outside her cabin window, the forest breathed. Whined through pine needles. A raven's call. The same land that had nearly taken her life, and given it back. That afternoon, she walked the boundary trails alone. No radio. No sidearm. Just a pack and her thoughts. Every step reminded her of the choice before her. Leave the wild behind, or stay where it mattered most. At the clearing, she stopped. The tree still stood scarred. Time had softened the wounds, but they were visible if you knew where to look. Evelyn placed her palm against the bark, feeling the grooves left by claws and rope. "You could have killed me," she said softly to the forest. "But you didn't." A branch cracked behind her. She turned slowly. Atlas stood there, not 10 yards away. Bigger now. Heavier. His coat thick and dark, his scar faded but unmistakable. He didn't approach. He didn't retreat. They shared the space in silence. Evelyn felt something settle inside her then, something steady and certain. She understood the offer wasn't really about her career. It was about responsibility. People in offices could write policies, sign protections. But someone had to stand between greed and the land itself. Someone had to remember that this place wasn't empty, it was alive. Atlas lowered his head slightly, a subtle acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. Evelyn didn't follow. She didn't need to. That night, by lantern light, she wrote her response. She declined the job. In its place, she proposed something new, a field-based wildlife intervention unit trained not just in enforcement, but coexistence. Prevention. Understanding. The program would take years to build. She smiled as she sealed the envelope. Some debts are repaid in moments. Others become a lifetime commitment. 5 years passed. The program Evelyn built started small. 3 officers, 2 trucks, borrowed funding. Critics called it naive. Said compassion didn't stop bullets or snares. Said animals didn't remember, didn't choose, didn't care. They were wrong. Poaching incidents dropped sharply in the region. Conflict calls declined. Ranchers reported fewer retaliatory kills. Word spread, not just among people, but through patterns only the land itself could show. Corridors reopened. Balance returned. Evelyn aged in the field, lines deepening at the corners of her eyes, strength settling into something quieter but unshakable. She trained dozens of officers, teaching them how to read silence, how to recognize fear versus aggression, how to pause before pulling a trigger. And once a year, always alone, she returned to the clearing. On the 10th anniversary of the day she should have died, snow dusted the ground lightly, early and clean. Evelyn stood at the tree, older now, steady on her feet. She spoke softly, not expecting an answer. "I kept my promise." The forest answered anyway. A deep huff rolled from the tree-lean. Atlas stepped forward. Time had silvered his muzzle. His movements were slower, heavier. But his eyes were the same, amber, alert, aware. They stood facing one another across the clearing, neither crossing the invisible line between wild and human. No debt remained. No rescue owed. Just recognition. Atlas turned his head toward the deeper forest, where fresh tracks, smaller ones, marked the snow. Cubs. Evelyn smiled, tears freezing on her lashes. "That's good," she whispered. "That's very good." Atlas looked at her one last time. Then he did something she would never forget. He lowered his head, not in submission, but acknowledgement. A passing of something unspoken. And then he was gone, his massive form melting into the trees, into the future, into a story that didn't belong to her alone. Evelyn stayed for a long time after that, listening to the forest reclaim the moment. Wind erased tracks. Snow softened scars. Life moved forward. Somewhere, cubs would grow never knowing her name. But they would inherit a land safer than the one their mother was taken from. And that, she knew, was the truest rescue of all. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel something deep in your chest, then don't let that feeling fade. Stories like this matter because they remind us that rescue doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it has fur. Sometimes it has scars. Sometimes it comes back years later to repay a kindness the world forgot. If you believe animals are more than instincts, if you believe compassion can cross species, then help this channel grow. Like this video, because it tells the algorithm these stories deserve to be heard. Subscribe, so you never miss a rescue that needs witnessing. And share this story with someone who thinks wild animals are incapable of gratitude, memory, or choice. Every view helps amplify the truth that protecting wildlife isn't about domination, it's about respect. The more people who hear stories like this, the safer the forests become. And finally, leave a comment. Tell us what part moved you the most. These stories live on through conversation. Until the next rescue, remember this: kindness doesn't disappear into the wild. It waits. And sometimes it comes back.